TLO, what's poppin'? We are on Twitch. We're not live, but you can leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on your post notification bells. Let's continue to grow the family from Chicago to the UK. Right behind me, you see it, little warning screen. We won't need it, but people just be triggered in 2025, so it's there. Just in case. Twitch.com is where you can't catch a live stream. Usernames at the bottom. And we also got Patreon, Monday through Sunday. If you hear any noises in the background, that's the kids, man. You gotta multitask when you got kids, man. It is what it is. This is Jimmy the Giant, Britain's evil war on benefit scroungers. I heard Trump is taking away EBT. That's like food stamps out here. That's gonna be rough. That'll get him out of office. That's the one. My bad.
Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. No copyright infringement intended. All rights belong to their respective owners.
Bruv, from the 90s onwards, there was this endless barrage of TV shows, films, newspaper articles, obsessed with what was being dubbed the benefit scrounger.
Don't come that business with me that they want to work, Why would they want to work then? The rents are paid. They're either carrying a walking stick or on a mobility scooter and they've got nothing wrong with them.
But where did this obsession come from? And more importantly, how real is this stereotype?
I think we need to...
I feel like, at least in America, and from the shows that I watched in the UK, there's definitely people taking advantage of it. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like when it was so sweet at one point, somebody came over from somewhere else and was like, yo, I see the people of Britain doing it. And I tried it, and it worked. Now let's all do it. And now you got what you got today.
Acknowledge that our benefit system has become for many a career choice, and that frightens me.
Now look, poor people didn't just randomly appear when Jeremy Kyle decided to slag them off on primetime television. The poor have been a constant throughout history. You can go all the way back, right? The Mesopotamians. Them boys had laws designed to help poor people. And then you got a man like Jesus, who was constantly saying about how rich people are kind of shit and poor people need help. However, here in Britain, we had our own theory, and that was that poor people chose to be poor.
Before that, though, it was Kinganism, where it really did help everybody, helped everything.
You know who these shirkers are. You've seen them drinking their cans of beer, Sky Sports blaring. How do they pay for that? I tell you, you pay for it through your benefits.
In 1494, we made being poor illegal. But you see, as time passed, we softened up a little bit and our attitudes changed. We started to have politicians throwing out wacky ideas. They would say things like, look guys, I know as well as any other that the poors, most of them, they're choosing to be poor. I get that. But, I did meet a guy the other day who was born with...
I feel like that's not a fair aspect, though. Like, some people are choosing to be poor, but some people are just circumstances of their situation.
No arms or legs, and I'm not sure that he chose that. Philip, behave yourself. Are you reading The Guardian again? In 1834, we had a new poor law. It was called the Poor Law, and it actually made a legal distinction between the deserving and the undeserving poor. The deserving poor were like orphan children and disabled people where, it wasn't their fault that they were poor. But the undeserving poor... Sorry. These were like beggars and people who were physically fit, like their bodies worked somewhat, but they were poor because they couldn't be bothered to work. They were being lazy.
Does addiction fall into the choice or non-choice?
But you see, this theory and the law, which was mainly talking about unemployed people, it really kind of glossed over the fact that many people in this era were employed, working, and were in deep poverty. As Britain had got wealthier and wealthier through the Industrial Revolutions, this wealth had found itself in the hands of the very wealthy. Their lives had drastically improved. But at the same time we were seeing this incredible level of wealth, we were also seeing an unparalleled level of poverty.
That gap was crazy.
So like all this poverty, right? Living in piss and poo, singing songs about... It started to get some...
Better pick a pocket or two. It's crazy. Let's get to robbing.
Influential people to sort of rethink their positions on what causes poverty. And the bros got to work. They put their heads together and they started fucking thinking in that. And one of those geezers was a man by the name of Karl Marx. In his 1867 works, Das Kapital, he made a massive critique of capitalism and the capitalist system. He argued that poverty was actually a byproduct of capitalism. The requirement for capitalists to make more and more profit meant that wages that were paid to workers could be driven down in order to make more profit. Now, Marx's work...
Yeah, to affect the bottom line. You pay less, you get more. The people who making the money for you get crumbs. But there's laws against that now, right?
Works inspired some very good ideas and some... What are you guys doing? But you see, here in Britain, we managed to avoid the whole executing people wearing glasses thing. But his ideas did lead to the Beveridge Report.
The report proposes, first, an all-in scheme of social insurance, providing for all citizens and their families all the cash benefits needed for security.
Now this might just look like a small little pamphlet, but within it held the game plan to abolish poverty by creating the welfare state.
The Beveridge Report shows how to begin.
I'm pretty sure at first it was working fine. But there was that one... Where was the first person? I wonder who the first person was to take advantage of benefits.
Overthrowing the 5 giant evils. It spurs us all to greater effort. If we can produce so much for war, much can be done for peace.
The British led the world in providing free education for all people in society, financial support for those who are unemployed, financial protections for disabled people, money to support families, a minimum wage, and
that free education hit.
free healthcare for all people. Between 1950 and 1969, the unemployment rate was just 1.6%. That's unheard of. We drastically declined poverty, massively raised living standards for all people, and we had the greatest economic...
Is this the Kinganism era? Or what is... this is the welfare state.
...boom of our history.
Finally, the Prime Minister pays his own tribute to what has become a great national institution.
I'm confident that just as the nation saved for victory in time of war, so in time of peace, it will save for prosperity.
Before we go any further, I want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace.
Hey, shout out to Jimmy the Giant for getting that Squarespace sponsorship, man. Paying the bills. Never doubted you.
A bespoke website to you and your brand. As well as that, their payment system. So if you're selling goods online and people than ever, later world tweaking.com/Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video. An incredible 52% of British people said when asked in a survey that they are very happy. But you see, whilst everyone was having fun slapping their knees, giggling and high-fiving each other, there was one person who was not so happy about all of this.
I thought, another Conservative government. But you also thought maybe it would be a bit different because she's a woman.
Margaret Thatcher again? Bro, she's at the bottom of every problem that Britain has ever faced, almost. Oh my days. Jesus, she is undefeated at ruining a good time in Britain. This is crazy.
Oh, how wrong can you be?
Thatcher! Sound the alarms, boys. Damn you, Thatcher! She was not such a big fan of the welfare state. But to be totally clear, she didn't come in just saying, fuck poor people. I mean, she weren't far off, but it was more subtle than that. This advert, run by the Conservatives in 1979, was trying to pin the high unemployment of that era onto the Labour Party and a kind of social cultural ill.
So politics ruined it?
I believe that we were going towards a way of life in which people were constantly looking to the state to solve their problems and to do things for them.
Now the thing is, right, in this period, like in the 70s, there was high unemployment, but it wasn't because of what fucking Thatcher was trying to say it was very complicated. There were lots of different factors that were all tying together at the same time. There was an oil crisis, which completely made the price of oil insane. There was a global banking system breakdown, and there were some bad policies thrown in. But don't worry about all of that and the endless literature that explains why poverty exists. No, just listen to Thatcher. It's the nanny state that is creating a culture.
But there's always the group of people that's gonna listen. They just want something to blame somebody on. When there's too much peace and tranquility, people will rise above it and stop it.
Benefit scroungers.
You know, when the state does everything for you, it'll soon take everything from you.
Thatcher pushed this narrative that everyone in society was part of the aspirational working class, soon to get their David Lloyd's membership, start shopping at Waitrose, and join the middle class. She made the British people perceive the help from the state as being like infantilizing, like we don't need help, what are we, children?
No.
I feel like Margaret Thatcher was silver spoon fed. Like she never had any issues growing up. Like her whole family was rich.
Anyone who wasn't in this boat of like aspirational working class, well, they must just not be working hard enough. And so Thatcher went to work, right? She revved up the war machine to go to war on the welfare state.
Margaret Thatcher got rid of all the industry. She kicked the life out of working people because there was no work there and people want to work.
And her first...
And now look at these seashore towns in the UK. Down, the most derelict, poor places that you can find out there. It's crazy. Any industrial town is down bad.
Tax were by raising the price of social housing rent to try and push people into renting from the private sector. This led to 350,000 pensioners to lose their housing benefits. She also cut the benefits to the families of people who were striking at the time by £12 a week, which back then was a lot of money. She cut short-term benefits for sick people, the unemployed, and the disabled. She postponed increasing child benefits, and even state pensioners suffered a fall in real income. It's also said that, ironically, her government pushed people who are unemployed to go onto disability benefits to literally like fudge the numbers and try and hide the fact that unemployment was rising due to her policies. And so, the war on the welfare state had well and truly begun.
Do you think Margaret Thatcher had girl power?
Yes.
I feel like Trump is kind of doing the same thing a little bit. Well, not as, I don't know. Maybe it looks a little different. It's wrapped up a little differently.
Of course.
Do you think she effectively utilized girl power by funneling money to illegal paramilitary death squads in Northern Ireland?
I don't know about that.
So this created a problem. Like, if you bought into the neoliberal ideology of Thatcher, the belief that shrinking the state would make us all wealthier, well, we would need to explain why there was a sharp increase in child poverty, pensioner poverty, and, you know, just general poverty, rise in unemployment, rise in inequality. I mean, what did you expect?
If you cut public expenditure, though, won't that mean more unemployment?
I'm afraid having high public expenditure has led to high unemployment, and that's...
She was just making stuff up. She was delusional a little bit, it seems. Whatever narrative she could create to fit what she was doing, she did it with not even blinking her eye.
The result of socialist policies in practice.
With no remorse.
And so, in unison, the media machine went to work on creating a brand new boogeyman to pin all of the blame on: the benefit scrounger.
Addresses in and around Birmingham have been raided in the opening volley of a government war on benefits cheats.
When I searched on the British newspaper archive for the word benefit scrounger, and bearing in mind this doesn't include a lot of the mainstream papers, but we see a massive increase in the usage from the 70s to the 80s, and then a sharp rise in the 90s. To put this into perspective, Tony Blair became the Prime Minister of Britain in 1997 through to 2007.
I think for the past 18 years, often the poorest people in our country have been forgotten by government, except very often for the purposes of blaming them. I don't want there to be any forgotten people in the Britain that we want to build.
Although he talked the talk about caring for the poor,
I think after Margaret Thatcher, people got so poor, that's when they started really scrounging for benefits. When they came back under his realm, it was so nice. They was like, no, we can't let this happen. We got to take maximum advantage.
Vulnerable of society, he also submitted to the idea of the benefit scrounger. He went to the bloody Aylesbury estate, which is synonymous for being a sink estate. It's where all the gangster films are made. And he gave a speech where he said, New Labour's policy would provide a hand up and not a hand out. Blair's approach was to sound sympathetic to poverty, but to sort of imply that it was their fault. He would say things like, there will be and should be no fifth option of an inactive life on benefits. And in a very short period of time, the British public's attitude toward poverty drastically changed.
What the Housing Association is saying is that actually you shouldn't be spending it on things like drink and cigarettes. You should be spending it on food. I mean, I know you've got a 16-year-old daughter.
Well, that's why y'all used to give like checks, like actual cash and load people's cash with money. Like it should always go directly to housing with a receipt sent to you. And then if there's food needed, like America does, like with the EBT food stamp card, you can only get food products on it. Like you should never get cold hard cash because people gonna do what they do.
You should be spending it looking after her and keeping a roof over your head.
There was this wave of newspaper coverage just out of nowhere on this topic, which led to a further wave of film and television coverage. They would show this image of like angry, aggressive, low-class chavs who are living on benefits, unemployed, doing nothing but having children, spending their benefits on cigarettes and alcohol, and shouting at their neighbours. Little Britain had the infamous portrayal of the guy in a wheelchair who would claim benefits by faking that he was disabled.
What happened? She pushed me.
Vicky Pollard as well became the caricature of like a white working class benefit scrounger. Now these shows were all fiction, but then from here there was a...
Are they fiction or are they based on real events?
Rise in non-fiction TV shows such as The Jeremy Kyle Show, which started airing in 2005. This show was unbelievably successful. One of the biggest reality TV shows ever, reaching a peak of 1 million viewers a week. And this show ran for ages. Like, it didn't get cancelled that long ago because...
It was like Jerry Springer. I don't know why it got cancelled. They'll probably reboot this, and it'll be the biggest thing in Britain since Tea.
One of the guests topped themselves.
Be a man, grow a pair of balls, and tell her the goddamn truth.
And this guy, this Jeremy Kyle, he still is in media. He's on like Talk TV, where his positions on people on benefits is basically the same as it was back then. And he just embodies this disgusting attitude of like middle class sneering down at poor people.
We have now bred a society where there are people who have no intention of working and want to take advantage of the system, and that is not good enough.
The media machine in this period of time from the 2000s just went into overdrive, churning out this type of content. Like, for instance, the show Benefits Britain. This was a big show. It's very popular. This show goes into the lives of people who live on this street who are mainly on benefits and unemployed. And it portrays them as like alcoholic retrobates that are paid to not work and engage in antisocial behavior.
I feel like Billy Moore, the All or Nothing podcast, he does this too, but it's more in a classy way. That's why his channel is so popular.
Enough of benefits, that is just as simple as that.
I've got a big television, I've got my games consoles. You know, why shouldn't we have them?
The first time in my life I have to actually pay rent.
And it played into this image of the ungrateful benefits leech that lived off of the state, committing crimes and failing to take personal responsibility of their actions. However, what this show does is it completely glosses over the fact that the place it was filmed in, Stockton-on-Tees, is one of the poorest towns in Britain. They didn't stop to ask, why is it one of the poorest towns in Britain? Which, had they asked that question, you would find out that this town was one.
I think deep diving and all of that when it's just TV for entertainment. I know it's real life for other people, but the reason it's on TV is because it's entertaining. When you deep dive and really figure out all that stuff, it becomes unentertaining, and you become worried. It takes the relaxation out of watching it.
once a prosperous industrial town with a strong employed community. However, once it was deindustrialized due to neoliberal policies, the entire industry of the town was just pulled out from underneath their feet, and the people were given very little assistance in, like, I don't know, retraining them into a new industry, or even major investments into bringing new industries into their town. They were just left behind.
I think this tells you enough about Stockton already. Cash exchange, betting shop, slot machine shop.
And just bear in mind, this show was created by Channel 4, stationed in a wealthy part of London. And it just further embodies this sort of London elite middle class sneering down the poor working class northerners. Now look,
we do no Channel 4 reactions. They will strike you.
Can't lie, I can stand there all high and mighty now looking back on this content and being like, yeah, it was fucked. But we all loved it. We all loved Little Britain. Little Britain was hilarious. And like, you know, who did?
I currently watched all of these. And I love them. On Patreon, all of this stuff is on there except Jeremy Kyle.
Didn't watch Jeremy Kyle. Like, you can't pretend you never sat there and watched him.
Them teeth not real. I refuse to believe that.
But whilst at the time we all basically considered it a bit of light-hearted fun, it was basically propaganda, and it was doing something much darker to our minds. And research shows that since the 90s, the public perception of unemployed people went from being largely sympathetic into basically being an attitude of disgust.
There's another thing called the benefit system, that you can get everything. You can get a house, you can get money. You have to prove.
Daytime TV and the tabloids turned the people against people on benefits. They gave them a too in-depth look at a small percentage of people who, I guess, are outrageously doing things.
Prove need.
No more pauses.
Yeah, you have to prove need by faking need.
And you can see it here, like throughout the 80s to the 90s, there was a widespread belief that the benefit system for out-of-work unemployed people was much too low. It needed more money. But that completely changed. By 1999, the majority of people had started to feel that the benefit system was far too generous. And even amongst the Labour Party voters, back in 1987, 73% of Labour Party supporters believed that the government should be spending more on welfare benefits for poor families. However, by 2011, that number dropped to 36%. The propaganda machine had well and truly worked.
Media got y'all. The cost of living is at an all-time high, with pay rates now going up currently. And I'm pretty sure this was an ongoing thing.
Day 3 on the campaign trail, and the leaders of all three main parties are certainly clocking up plenty of miles between them. This election will be the closest run for a generation.
Right, so now it's 2010. A general election is underway. And both parties, the Conservatives and Labour, run a campaign where its manifesto focused a fair bit on benefit scroungers. In the Labour manifesto, it states that our job guarantees will put an end to long-term unemployment and a life on benefits. No one fit for work should be abandoned to a life on benefit. The Conservatives, they go and mention the hand up, not a handout thing. And they also...
People don't get it by now. They target whatever issue is going on, and they just targeted to get those votes.
Talk about getting people off of benefits. Now look, all this conversation about the benefits was because, and there is truth to this, prior to 2010, a lot more people were starting to claim benefits. And politicians, you know, they saw this massive rise in people using the benefit system and concluded, fuck, you know, everyone's just become lazy.
We do live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, yet more than 1 in 4 working age adults simply don't work. 5 million people are trapped on out-of-work benefits. 1.4 million people have been receiving out-of-work benefits for 9 out of the last 10 years.
However, they just sort of glossed over the fact that in 2008, the largest financial crash since the Great Depression happened, which wiped out people's savings, destroyed people's lives, fucked up communities, decimated high streets, and massively increased unemployment. Because we deregulated the banks and allowed them to speculate on things they should never have speculated on, whilst making insane amounts of money, the government announced that to fix that, we need to, unfortunately, cut loads of money to poor people.
In the face of a record £156 billion deficit, the austerity measures include government departments losing a quarter of their budgets, taxes for higher earners, a freezing of public sector pay, and reductions in welfare benefits.
Many things were cut, but very notably, the welfare state via things like cutting people's social housing allowance and their unemployment benefits. Just look at this graph. Remember this graph. If I can get a tattoo of this graph. It's believed that we slash spending to the sound of £500 billion of planned public spending. It was originally sold that it would be short and it was going to fix the deficit, and it was proposed that once we've balanced the books, we'll go back to public funding. But that promise never arrived. We just kind of created a new normal of an underfunded welfare state, which has created crisis after crisis of problems that we never anticipated.
But the reality is that she has not saved any tax revenue as a consequence. What she hasn't done is put that £3 billion into the economy for people to spend. So there is less money available rather than money saved. That is what austerity does.
We need to make some cutbacks. Let's freeze teachers' wages.
Great idea. I didn't get that pay rise, and the rent's gone up.
Well, we'll just have to cut down on our food bills. Business is slow. It didn't make as much this month.
We'll have to cancel the renovations.
This is a great depiction on how it all went down.
Sorry, we
cause and effect.
Can't give you those extra hours. We lost a few contracts.
Oh, that's all right. I'm sure things will pick up.
Economic growth has slowed and the national debt is still going up.
2012.
We'll have to make more cuts.
And many economists these days believe that austerity is a completely flawed concept. And despite the fact that the people who presented the idea of austerity to the government, their Excel spreadsheet had an error. And the researchers who wrote the whole paper that inspired austerity admit that they were wrong. And it might seem insane to you, and it does to me. We are still doing it. Under the Labour Party, who are meant to be the party to bring the end to this sort of stuff, they recently cut pensioners' fuel payments by £300. That is austerity.
If we cannot afford it, we cannot do it.
Now look, I don't claim to be some unbiased centrist reporter. You can see where I stand on this topic. But all of this attack, it does beg the question, is there...
Yeah, we've never thought his to be unbiased. A lot of it is biased and his full-fledged opinion on how it feels. And that's fine. That's how it should be. It's his channel, his opinion.
Any truth to the benefit scrounger stereotype? Well, look, let's just be fucking honest. These people featured in these shows, they existed. The benefit scrounger, which is often sort of crossed over with the chav and the idea of like sinker states, is a byproduct of a number of things that happened.
Was that Black D?
In British political history, where a lot of this kind of culture has come from a process known as residualisation, where the government took individuals that it considered to be more troubled and put them into like the poorer council estates, you know, away from maybe the more affluent ones. By doing this, it meant that when Thatcher led the right to buy scheme and allowed people to buy their social houses off of the government, the better off working class people started to buy their houses off the state. Some years would pass, they would sell off their council house, make a bit of money and move off the council estate. But the ones who weren't able to buy their houses, you know, the ones who were doing a little bit worse, maybe they were struggling a little bit, they were left stuck in these areas. So combine this process with deindustrialization, which cut loads of jobs and led to high unemployment, cuts to public services that might help worse off communities, left lots of people with less opportunities and less prospects in life. And you would have these whole estates where just they started going into sharp decline.
Kids are doing really well in the grade.
Yeah, and it's not like they putting people in there with knowledge of money and how to get a way out in there. They putting the poorest of poorest of poorest. You know that saying, only the strong survive? Well, this is where the weak go. They're not weak, but they're labeled as weak.
Kids move out the towns so they can get bigger opportunities because they don't get them opportunities here.
Combining that with, in 1992, with the introduction of school league tables, led to schools wanting to show that their school was doing well, to excluding some of the more troubled kids who maybe they had learning difficulties, maybe they were just a bit badly behaved. Those kids would get kicked out of the school, and where would they go? They would hang out on the council estate getting up to trouble, which then creates this cultural vicious cycle.
No cap, that's what my high school does. When I first went to this high school, I'm gonna tell y'all the name of it. I went to a school in the suburbs called Niles North. They did not have a lot of black people. They definitely didn't have black people from single family homes or from anywhere outside of their little area. And they would just they would kick them out and put them in. They would kick them out and they would put them in alternative schools, so it wouldn't mess up test scores, so the teachers wouldn't have to go through any extra things or anything like that. That's definitely what they did, 100%.
It's become very evident in some of the most neglected, rundown council
estates.
They
had no teachers at the time that could understand what any child from poverty was going through. They wanted straight edge everything.
It's in Britain.
I mean, they think basically, you're wasting your life.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you say to them?
We always
We'd say to them we've got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
But we don't like drinking.
But
It's not the point that we haven't got nothing else, so we do like drinking. But if you had something like occupy your mind most of the time, we drink now and then, but we drink all the time because we've got nothing else to do.
Now, as much evidence as we have of good welfare states having good outcomes, welfare states can be managed badly and they can create problems if done badly. There's historic examples of a thing called...
Definitely. It gotta be paid attention. You can't do it lacklusterly and just think the people are gonna do it themselves. There's always, especially in 2025, somebody's always gonna be trying to get over. You know what I'm saying?
Welfare traps. I believe in Britain we have it as well.
Your new job pays just enough to disqualify you from the benefit programs and not enough to cover the same costs. To make things worse, you have to pay for transportation to work and childcare while you're at the office. Somehow, you have less money now than when you were unemployed.
It's fucking stupid. We know it's stupid. People have been calling to reform this for over 10 years and just no one's done it. You can fix it. You just have to make it so that your benefits slowly taper off as you...
I personally think childcare should be free. I know it would be probably terrible. It would be just as terrible as... No, it wouldn't be even terrible. You just have to, wait in line for it like you have to do at the NHS. But childcare should be a government-funded thing. That way you would have no excuse to not to go to work.
You earn more money instead of just completely stopping once you go over the threshold. But,
But everything else has to be not free. No more food for free. No more free housing. But childcare is free. Now, there's no excuse for you not to be at work. Oh, I got my kid. No, you don't. Go to work. Let's fix all the stuff surrounding having a job and having the benefits and stuff, and then go to work.
But when it comes to the claim that welfare state...
Yeah, I'm glad they came in here and you heard them. I'm here pushing videos out and still managed to watch a child or two. There's 2 kids here. I'm still watching them and doing this, multitasking. But... I understand some people can't multitask, and it's not that hard to watch children who are 4, 5, and 6. Now, I understand, toddlers and 2, 1, you got to put a little more effort into it. I'm not saying that this is an effortless thing, but, you can get away with doing some at-home job stuff.
It's make people lazy. Well, that one, there's been lots of research.
But that's my solution. Fix all the stuff with the job market and not matching up with the cost of living. Fix all of that, and then make childcare free. Childcare and keep health free. If people are still jobless with no health care, with free childcare, then yeah, they definitely trying to get over. Because a lot of the excuses, man, I got kids, I can't go to work. Well, it's free. I ain't trying to hear that.
Into welfare states. A recent study actually was done that went through 7 different welfare states where they found that giving people money doesn't negatively affect their work ethic. And in fact, some studies actually showed the opposite, that giving people benefits can actually encourage them to have more work ethic. There was this other big comparative analysis that was done on welfare states that went across 18 European countries, and it showed that employment increased as they increased social spending.
there is no contradiction between competitiveness and social welfare. In fact, it's the contrary. Competitiveness is a social policy de facto. That sort of social expenditure is a consequence of competitiveness.
But then there's one more thing. Even if you accept that welfare states are great and they do lots of good stuff and they help people, what about the fraudsters? We hear a lot about these gangs and people who are scamming the welfare system and making loads of money. Well, let's put it into perspective. The UK spends 12.9% of its GDP on benefits, on the low end compared to similar countries. Between 2023 and 2024, welfare spend was 276 billion, with 55% going to pensioners. The estimated loss in this system due to fraud was 7.3 billion pounds. But what does that number mean? You don't know what it means. What does it mean? It's just,
that's still, hey, 7.3 now.
The fuck is a number? Give you something to compare it to, right? Money laundering cost us 100 billion. And just financial crimes in general cost us 219 billion. Which, you know, if we add those two...
All right. In the grand scheme of things, 7.3 billion amongst other real crimes is light.
numbers together is... yeah, it's more than 7.3 billion.
Fuck you, science!
And just like tax avoidance in general, where the wealthy are using tax loopholes to not pay their fair share, the HMRC concluded that 39.8 billion went untaxed in 2022 to 2023. We never hear about that. We don't care about fraud. We don't care about crime. What we care about is the class of the criminal.
Why is one called Benefit Street and the other the Wolf of Wall Street? Why is one demonized and the other lionized?
And when you talk about welfare states, you also have to talk about healthcare and education. A healthier, educated population is a population who can work more for longer hours, more productively. And like, you know, so many studies will show that welfare states reduce poverty. Less poverty equals less crime. Less crime equals less money spent on policing. The evidence that welfare states have been a success in the Western world is just, it's undeniable. You'd have to be insane to deny that. Just consider that pre-welfare state, people who are poor lived like this, and this is what they live like after, you know, it's obvious.
It'd be cause and effect, like I said earlier, though, like all the whole the seesaw of giving and taking, giving and taking, giving and taking, it created a lot of greed. So when the giving got to giving again, it got greedy. And then it was like, oh, well, is this working? Well, it was until y'all start, you know, greed on both sides made you seesaw it. So, I don't know.
Hope that London after the war will be a city without slums, a city of air and light, of spacious parks and boulevards. Among the most comprehensive of the schemes proposed for the Britain of the future is that of Liberal MP Sir William Beveridge, whose plan for social security is predicated on the assumption that freedom from want can best be achieved through cooperation of the state with the individual.
Now, the last little bit I want to go into is this new boogeyman that you hear a lot about in the media now. Economic inactivity. Oh my God, inactive? Economically?
There is a missing million. I think now it's actually about a missing 1.2 million in the labour market. So the challenge, as others have said, is actually less unemployment, but actually the fact that we've got this huge increase in the number of people who have just opted out of the labour market.
Economically inactive people are people of working age who have been out of work for the last 4 weeks and are not seeking work within the next 2 weeks. And like the media kind of likes to sell this as this image of lazy teenagers pretending they have bipolar and just living on the dole. But let's have a closer look at this, right? So in 2024, 9.4 million people between the age of 16 to 64 were economically inactive. That is 22%. And this is big news because it's growing.
I need more of a definition of economically inactive, though. Like, what exactly did that mean?
50,000 people extra since the COVID pandemic are economically inactive. And like, if you just listen to GB News about that, you would say, fucking hell, 20.
Like they just not in the workforce, they not filing taxes. Is that what that means?
2%. Fucking hell. But you have to look deeper. You have to break these numbers down for them to mean anything. Now, a large chunk of people who are economically inactive include students, making up 26%, you know, studying,
that
hopefully
count.
Getting degrees to get good jobs in the future if our country doesn't collapse. 11.6% are retired people, early retired, you know, they made their money. They can
Also
put their feet
doesn't
up.
count.
And
You take them
17%
out
are
of
people who are looking after their family members, maybe as a mum. So that leaves us with, when it comes to people who are long-term or short-term sick, and that's the reason that they are not in work and not seeking work, that is 32.2% of all economically inactive people. When they were looking at this in 2022, they said that the majority of economically inactive due to sickness were people in their 50s and 60s. And the paper accredits this to COVID. COVID had lots of other effects on human bodies, and some people suffered from it much worse. They then also cited that the increase in the NHS waiting times due, again, to COVID and funding of the NHS, obviously, led to people having worse health in general because they weren't being seen quick enough by the NHS, so their illnesses got worse.
That makes sense. I heard somebody like left a comment explaining that the wait times were so long that they would just get worse and worse and their health would deteriorate because scheduling was like a year and out. Like, it was crazy.
We take 4 million unemployed people. We say 2 million are mentally ill and disabled. I'm not falling for the left's thing that everybody's got mental illness. I think that's rubbish.
I think there is a whole different issue around this question of mental health, and I think we have over-medicalised the normal ups and downs that we all feel.
So, mental health. Let's fucking talk about it. So when we look at the amount of people that claim benefits, disability benefits in 2024, the total number of people who are claiming were 385,000 people. That's it. That's the total amount of people on disability benefits in 2024. 2 in 5 of them, so 145,000 people, were claiming disability benefits due to mental health reasons. Remember,
my friend couldn't even get benefits for like not working. And he had diabetes and his foot was messed up. And he couldn't get it. Not in America. They would not give it because he was too young. His age was, but he had it. He had it. We used to call him Sugarfoot. we wild.
Remember the headline?
And by we, I mean me. It was only me calling him Sugarfoot.
22% of people are economically inactive. When we filter all those numbers down into who is actually claiming disability benefits for mental health problems, that 9.4 million people becomes just 145,000 people, which is about 0.2% of the British population.
Nothing.
The maximum amount of disability benefits you can get off the government a year is £9,600. And also, just additionally, just bear in mind that 1 in 6 of the people who are claiming that benefit are actually still in work. And let's pretend that all of them got the maximum amount of benefits, which they wouldn't have, but let's just pretend that that's the case. This would mean that all of this big palaver people are making, costs us £1.3 billion. That's the number. That's the end game number that everyone's getting worried about. 1.3 billion, which is, you know, that's definitely much more important than all the money laundering and the financial crime. Just that
sounds like it's just a misdirection. It's just, okay, this is nothing like, but let's blame somebody. Let's scapegoat it. You know how the government get.
Is way more important. Don't talk about that. Talk about the disabled people.
I think we must recognise that there is some abuse. There are some scroungers who are prepared to use all the devices available to get more than they're entitled to. But they're a very, very small proportion. Our experience shows that the vast majority of people are entitled to the benefits that we receive. And the real problem in the country isn't the problem of people having benefits to which they're not entitled, but a very large number not getting benefits to which they are entitled.
So I want to do a quick little thought experiment with you, right? Let's just pretend for 1 second that potentially COVID lockdowns plus a cost of living crisis plus a housing crisis combined with wage stagnation, low paying jobs, insecure jobs, worsening working conditions, longer waiting lists on the NHS, all of that stuff put together may have had a slight impact on making people not feel very good. And potentially that might have caused a real, genuine,
more than a slight impact,
in mental health crisis. So look, I want to bring this all together by just giving some final perspective here. At the same time that people are trying to peddle out this idea that, I don't know, all the young people have just become lazy, right now, at that exact same time, the UK has historically high employment rates and historically low unemployment rates. On top of that, 38%.
Wait, 4.8 unemployment rate?
of people who are on benefits are currently in work. They work jobs and they have to take benefits off the government because the jobs aren't paying them enough money to live. And also, we have a rising amount of people who are using food banks who are also in work. The issue isn't laziness, it's to do with jobs not paying enough for it to be worth people working.
The level of food bank need at the moment.
I hear that a lot too. That's like the number 2 thing I used to hear. I'm a full-time mom. I don't have a babysitter. I can't go to work. That was number 1. And the number 2 thing is, why would I go to work when they don't pay me enough when I can get more off benefits? That was the number 2 thing.
Is at historic levels, something to be ashamed of really in 2024.
I feel guilty for it, I really do, but we can't manage on the income we get.
We donate to food banks on a fairly regular basis because it's in this day and age, in this 21st century.
Good thing for good people. Big hearts.
People shouldn't be going to food banks. They should have an income that allows them to live a decent, honest, good working life. And these people in Newcastle are good, hard working.
Is he missing a frame?
People, salt of the earth, they're wonderful people, but there's just no investment in the area.
I don't personally believe that you are not allowed to critique the management of the welfare state and say that sometimes it can be not done right. However, the truth is, many of the people who are critiquing the welfare state are using their critiques as a mask for what they truly believe, which is that many of those people just want to get rid of it altogether. They want to privatise more elements of it and sell it off to their billionaire friends, whether that's housing or the NHS.
If you're told you're too unwell to work and you're signed off by the GP, well, in many cases that leads to negative thoughts. It leads to you thinking, somehow, I'm a victim. You see, I think for many people, this is about a state of mind.
So, I mean, what you've got is you've got the same sort of statist agenda which helps foster this dependency culture, which is actually eating away at us like a cancer. So
to me, behind many of the arguments against the welfare state lies this deep nihilistic view of humanity, an elitist attitude towards humans that some people are just born
jail food
inherently inferior. They're just born lazy.
Oh, my bad. That's a food place. All right, my fault. No, that look good.
Worthless and want to cheat the system. And that lack of belief in humans, beyond just the academic research saying it's not true, I just don't fucking buy it on a personal level. People are not lazy. People want to work, but they don't want to be taken advantage of. Pay people a fair fucking wage for fair hours so that they can afford to have a happy, meaningful life.
Very factual. I feel like a lot of people that's out on the street, they'd get a job if it was fair, if it made sense.
Be able to realistically,
because time is of the essence. Literally, you can never get it back, and I ain't finna be wasting my time at a job that's not even feeding my family. You know?
I don't know, buy a house and maybe have kids. Imagine some kind of nice future for themselves. Give people a purpose and something to strive towards, and they will work hard.
Sometimes you don't want to come home because you can't put your heating on. I work 5 days a week and I still have to use the community shop.
Once you've bought all the essentials for the month, how much are you left with? Nothing.
As a people, we need to start understanding the roots of poverty. And we need to start looking at the people who wrote the economic policy. And those who, whilst the rest of society have got poorer and poorer, have somehow managed to double their wealth.
It's not the corporations. They're just chasing their agenda. And their agenda is deregulate, give us what we want. But if their agenda is cut tax, and it always is, it falls on the politicians. So where do we cut spending? They poor people, they can't defend themselves. How do we make the public swallow it? Let's do one more speech about benefit cheese. And that's how it works.
If you enjoyed this video...
This was... Jimmy, I just want to let you know that this background that you use is fairly hypnotizing. This is good for retention. TLO, leave a like, comment.